New videos every day.
We all love pleasure, but is too much pleasure making us miserable? While it's perfectly natural that we seek pleasure and enjoy entertainment, are we actually sabotaging our happiness by overindulging our senses? The problem with overstimulating our senses is that it can make the rest of our lives seem dull. We may not enjoy the things we used to enjoy or care about the things we used to care about. And in some cases, overstimulation can even lead to addiction, when the mere absence of that addictive thing causes depression, anxiety, and a compulsive hunt for that satisfaction. So when does a hobby become an addiction? And when does a pleasure become a vice? Today I'm counting down America's top favorite sources of entertainment to see if we can find out. Technological advances have taken us from the handwritten letter to the handheld computer, from Morse code messages to live video chatting. But is the ability to get online and immediately reach thousands of people making us more social or less social? What once would have taken hours of flipping pages in a library can now be achieved within a matter of seconds from the comfort of your own home or even while you're walking down the street. But is social media making us more social beings, or does it just make it easier to withdraw and isolate? If we are walking down the street, is it more likely that we're going to make eye contact with someone and smile at them, or that we're going to have our face in our phone and not even realize we've just passed another person? Is it possible that we could become so overstimulated by online chatting that face-to-face communication becomes a thing of the past? Remember when a woman showing her ankles was considered risque? While you may not remember that time personally, I think we can all agree that the world around us is getting sexier. And if you take a look at the marketing, you'll see that nearly everyone is relying on that age-old adage, sex sells. And they're using it to sell everything from soda pop and fast food to cars and tool belts. Forget about pushing the envelope, they've all but kidnapped the envelope and thrown it off a cliff. How much farther can it go? How long before they're showing people having sex on public access television? And exactly how is all of this sex affecting our brains? If we're bombarded by sex on the TV, advertisements, movies, music videos, could it have anything to do with the high rates of promiscuity, infidelity, unwanted or teen pregnancies, and sexually transmitted diseases? And if the images are not realistic anyways, then could that be why so many people have body image issues? Why do we idolize celebrities for making sex tapes and flashing their private parts? What message do you think that we're sending to young girls about the role of sex or the importance of looking sexy? Do you think it's okay for girls to be looking sexy before they're even old enough to drive a car? Do you ever feel captivated by the television screen? Between all the flashing lights, bright colors, and other visual delights, our brains are getting a boatload of stimulation. And it's made me wonder, could all of this flashy, mile-a-minute motion have anything to do with our diminishing attention spans? Rates of ADD, ADHD, and the adult onset varieties have risen consistently over the last decade. If our kids are spending huge amounts of time in front of a TV, getting loads and loads of stimulation, is it really any surprise that they have a hard time paying attention in class? Scientists know that when you overstimulate the brain responds by becoming less sensitive to stimulation. So it makes sense that over time, normal life becomes less stimulating, less engaging, and kind of boring. And if you throw in the lack of exercise in this country, ADHD rates make even more sense. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with sex or arguably with porn. Having a healthy sex drive and enjoying sex is really quite natural. But here's what worries me. As the porn becomes more vulgar, more violent, and more disgusting, do you think it's possible that it would affect our capacity to enjoy real sex with a real person? To quote Randy from South Park, Once you've jacked off to Japanese girls puking in each other's mouths, you just can't go back to Playboy. What's your personal experience with porn? Does it add to your relationship? Or if your girlfriend knew what you were watching, would she totally flip? Have you ever known someone who was addicted to porn? And did it make their lives better, or did it make their lives harder? No pun intended. Video game creators want you to play their game compulsively. They want you to kind of develop an addiction to their game, and understandably they engineer the games for that effect. So of course a video game is going to be more stimulating than real life. You can fly, you can live in a fantasy world, you get to create a whole new identity, you get to fight zombies, armies, all kinds of different things. So of course we're going to be more stimulated, and of course we might all kind of rather live in a virtual world than in the real world. A Harvard researcher and the director of the Computer Addiction Study Center stated that her clients generally turn to video games for the social aspect, the feeling that they belonged to something or were part of something bigger. And another psychologist added on that creating a new identity seeks to mend the unhappiness in our life, but it is really a short-term fix to addressing the unhappiness in our lives. So video games are the ultimate escape, but if our escape prevents us from enjoying the things in the real world, or our escape is preventing us from ever even wanting to be in the real world at all, is that really benefiting our overall happiness? Or are we taking the instant gratification of being in a video game to the detriment of our overall happiness? Back in the good old days, the comedy was called slapstick, and it involved a couple of stooges basically just making fools out of themselves. So how did we go from Charlie Chaplin to Jackass? It seems like these days you can't even get a laugh without stapling your genitals to something and lighting it on fire. What is it about watching other people experience pain that we find so entertaining? Why is it that some of the most popular videos on YouTube are of people having really bad accidents or hurting themselves? The scary movies have gotten scarier, the violence more horrifying. In a country that spends 58% of tax dollars on the military, it almost seems like they don't mind us being desensitized to violence. And if we weren't so desensitized to violence, would we be more likely to oppose our country going to war? Would we be more likely to speak up about it? What do you think? In a recent video, I spoke about a study that examined junk food addiction in rats. And basically what they found is that the same mechanism in drug addiction and alcoholism was also acting on the rats, where their brains were becoming so overstimulated that they became addicted to the junk foods. The brain responds to overstimulation by becoming less sensitive, and the result is addiction to the junk foods, compulsive overeating, and an inability to enjoy other foods. One study showed that even electric shock would not deter the rats from eating the junk food. And in another study, they found that rats would starve themselves before consuming the non-junk foods after they had the junk food addiction. So if these foods are causing physical changes in our brains that desensitize us to the flavors of the natural foods that we really should be eating, is it any wonder that dieting is so damn difficult and that America has become the most obese country in the world? Now that scientists have shown that these foods cause physical changes in the brain, physical addictions to the foods, do you think that food manufacturers should be required to put a warning label on them? And even if they did have a warning label, would anyone listen? Do you think that people just think it's worth the instant gratification, worth the pleasure of the moment, when all of the health concerns and health factors have been shown time and time again? We know that these foods cause obesity, heart disease, and a myriad of other problems. But do you think that the instant gratification is still worth it? So it seems that the line between a pleasure and a vice is whether that thing adds to your life or takes from your life. Does it give you a creative outlet or some kind of emotional expression? Does it agree with your moral values? Does it improve your health or your long-term happiness? Or does it actually draw you from your life, draw you away from your family, your job, or your goals? What do you think? Is it okay for us to enjoy the moment, enjoy the instant gratification, and then just pay for the rest later? Or do you think that we really could be happier overall if we enjoyed life's simple pleasures more and didn't overindulge to the point of extreme and everything else? So, what do you think? I really want to know. And if you haven't given me a thumbs up yet, I really hope you'll go ahead and press that like button below. So we've seen the dangers of overstimulation, but we aren't completely at fault. Certainly we're the ones who ultimately decide to indulge, but companies go out of their way to make their products stimulating and kind of addictive. So at what point is a company no longer providing a service and really just taking advantage of us being consumers? In a future video, we'll take a closer look. And in another video, we'll ask, is there really anything wrong with a little pleasure? And whose role is it to control which pleasures we enjoy and which pleasures are illegal for us to enjoy? And while we're on the subject of pleasure, one of America's most pleasurable things is enjoying food. But are food companies actually engineering the foods to be addictive and cause us to overeat? If you've ever wondered that question, check out my video right here. And if you've ever wondered what happiness has to do with accumulating stuff, you can check out this video up here, Happiness and the Story of Stuff. And if you've ever wondered what happiness has to do with boob jobs, you can check that one out down here. And if you'd like to see our video about Maslow's expanded hierarchy of needs and how we can really be happy, then you should check this one out down here.